I'm so glad you turned up. All my kids are here, my grandchildren are here, everyone's here. I was terrified nobody would come, but Sima and I, we have a story to tell, so I'm really glad you're here. You know what, before we start, most people say when they see the book, how the heck do I know Sima? How come we ended up together? And I want to tell you the story. So it was 1996. The Taliban had taken over Afghanistan. And you probably all remember John Stackhouse. He wasn't the editor of the Globe and Mail then. He was the India correspondent. But every once in a while, you know, when his Visa card got out of control, he'd write a piece for me at Homemakers. But he called me, and he said, have you ever heard of the Taliban? I said, no. He said, well, you better find out. They just took over Afghanistan. So then I heard that one woman in Afghanistan was defying the Taliban, defying them at every turn, keeping her schools for girls open, keeping the medical clinics for women open. She was a medical doctor. Well, I cover conflict, right? I cover what happens to women. I wanted a story on this woman. No one would give me her name. Everybody said, are you kidding? I can't tell you who she is. They could kill her. Kill her? So I was a little worried about that. But you know, then a woman called Farida Shahid in Pakistan, she said, well, come on over here and we'll talk about it and I'll see if I'll give you her name. I was working at Homemakers. My budget was this big, but I flew over to Pakistan, met with Farida. She spent the whole day telling me the ABCs of militant fundamentalism and what a catastrophe had befallen the women of Afghanistan, but no name. I said, who is this woman? She said, I can't tell you, they could kill her. And by 5 o'clock, I was in a bit of despair. After all, I'd traveled a bit of a distance. And at 5 o'clock, she said to me, there's a flight to Kuwait tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. You should be on it. And someone will meet you in the arrivals lounge. So I thought, my budget's up to here. I might as well go up to here. I flew to Kuwait. Can you imagine how excited I was? I arrived in the arrivals lounge, and this woman is walking toward me, smiling, extending her hand, and she said, you must be Sally. I'm Sima Samar. I think you've been looking for me. And that's how we met. And all these years later, I've been following her around, telling stories about her because she makes great copy. And then she asked me to collaborate with her while she told her story. So I want to start with a question. As I said, I followed her around a lot. I saw her, you know, she knows how to take your appendix out because she's a doctor. I saw what she did. I saw the way she lived. She's a seamstress excellent. She can cook. I can't cook. She can cook. She can take your appendix out. So my question to you is, you had a life, you know? You could have spent your life repairing broken limbs and prescribing penicillin, but instead you became the warrior for the women of Afghanistan. Why did you do that?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. And it's my pleasure to meet you in person after 5 years.
Is it so long?
I think so.
COVID.
When Deborah was ambassador, you came last time in Afghanistan. Anyway, and thank you for everyone to come here and listen to us. I think what I seen in my personal life and my own family, with my father had 2 wives, and there was not, I mean, they're saying that they are trying to treat women equally, but it's not possible. And also I saw the difference between the boys and girls within the family, within the society, and I also saw the discrimination against my ethnic group and my religion. So that put me in a position to stand for equality and fight for freedom and human rights in Afghanistan and also outside Afghanistan, because I believe that all these issues are connected and it's belong to every human being. So although I was trained as a doctor, as you said, but I was fighting for equality, not knowing all these Universal Declaration of Human Rights in CEDAW and CRC and so on, but I was very much involved. And as Farida, you mentioned Farida Shoaib, I was working with the Pakistani women during Ziaul-Haq when they were fighting against the implementation of Ziaul-Haq's policy, and learning from them that what we should do in Afghanistan. And you took me back to 1997, which was more hopeful than today, unfortunately. But yes, I don't lose hope. Yeah.
Well, you have been the warrior. But you know, when I first saw you in action, and those were difficult days, can you imagine? The Taliban had shut everything down for women. Their goal was really to make women disappear. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, that requires a lot of punishing and pretty hurtful edicts. But I saw you. I saw them threaten to kill you. One time, they said to her, close down your schools, shut down your hospitals, or we'll kill you. She didn't skip a beat. She said, go ahead, hang me in the public square and tell the people my crime. I was giving paper and pencil to the girls. So you talked back to them. How did you stay ahead of them? How did you keep those schools open and the clinics open?
Well, I think I believe on civilian disobedience, so that was part of my action. And I believe that education is the strongest tool to fight against the ignorance and fight against this misuse of religion and culture against women. So that is what happened. And I started with establishing clinic first because people were not thinking that they can wait for another 18 years in order to have their children as a doctor or as a teacher or as a scientist, but they have headache, they need aspirin or paracetamol. So I established the clinic first, and then I went to, next year I went to schools, and I keep the schools open in the areas, because in our area in Hazarajat, because the people were supportive. And it was not easy because I started with the boys' schools first. When I saw that the people are interested to send their children to school, to formal school rather than only the madrasas, the religious schools, then I said, if you don't send your daughter, I'm not going to support only the boys. So that way we convinced the people to send their daughters. And I think, when I think back, I'm glad that I did it. It was not easy, but I did it.
But didn't you do something? I remember a sign in front of a
Yes,
school.
yes.
What did you do about that?
Well, because they said that the girls cannot go up after 6th grade, above 6th grade to the school. So we put the signs of first A, first B, first C, and all those signs up to 6th grade. So the good part, in the first round of Taliban, they were not coming to the school. They were not entering to the school. And they were coming and asking the watchmen late in the afternoon, why these elderly girls are coming? And the watchman was saying, I'm illiterate, I don't understand, but they are the teacher. So but that way we keep the only high school during the first round of Taliban was those in Ghazni.
The sign on the door said, education here to grade 3. And inside, the kids were learning physics and chemistry and biology. And
yep.
I thought you got a lot of nerve, Sima. Didn't you also...
Yeah, it was not
Didn't
easy.
you open the first ever 24-hour clinic?
I did.
Why did you do that?
Well, when I moved to Pakistan in 1984, I started to work in a Christian hospital which had a branch for Afghan refugees. So, but that hospital was functioning from 8 to 1, 8 in the morning to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. But I was trying to stay as long as we had patients because it was my own people. So one morning I came to the hospital and there was a young Afghan woman who was pregnant, and she had convulsion and she had eclampsia. And I ran, the pharmacy was closed, the delivery room was closed, the labor room was closed, so I couldn't help her. So I transferred her to another hospital. By 12 noon time, I got the message. Somebody came up and said that that woman died. So I was so depressed because I thought that at least in Afghanistan and those countries, women cannot program their delivery to be from 8 to 1. So they need 24 hours emergency services. So I went to this man who was supporting the refugee branch of this hospital, and I was crying. He said, "What's happened?" Well, I said, I told the story, and he said, I said, can you give me some money so I can start a hospital? He looked at me, he said, "Oh, the fundamentalists, the Mujahideen will bomb our office." I said, I promise I will not tell anyone who funding. I mean, I was young, and I didn't have all the experience that I have today. So he looked at me, he said, "I'm sorry, I cannot, but let me think about it." After a week, he said, "Yes, I can fund a hospital." So we immediately, after 2 weeks, we established a hospital for women and children. It was 1978. No, not 78, 87.
80.
Sorry, yes.
Was it 87?
Yes, the first one.
Oh, yeah, before Shuhada started in 89.
Yes.
Okay, let's move forward to, God forbid, 9/11. And soon after, I think it was October the 7th, the Americans and the international community invaded Afghanistan. They got rid of the Taliban. We're going over some pretty important history in 2 or 3 sentences, but to get to the point, you became the first ever Minister of Women's Affairs, which meant now you were an insider.
Mm-hmm.
What was your first thought about what had to happen?
Well, as I said, during that time, I was fighting against the male domination in Mujahideen, who was also controlling women and oppressing women, discriminating against them. So when 9/11 was happened, we immediately knew that must be Afghanistan, because we already had, in 1998, the attack on American embassies in Tanzania and Kenya, and we received the missiles from the Americans because bin Laden was in Afghanistan. Then, of course, the attacks started, and I don't forget, because there was 2 journalists, Tristana Moore, and there was another woman, and they were at Sarina Hotel, and the Pakistani police stopped everybody. They asked everyone to stay in the hotel. Nobody was allowed to get out of the hotel. One of these women called me and said, "Can you help us?" And I said, "Yes, I can. You wait in the lobby of the hotel, I'll come." I went there with the car that we had, and one of them came, Tristana Moore or the other one of them came in the car, and I said, quietly, we just talked around, and then we came to the car. And the other one jumped from the wall outside on the street, so we picked up her, and I brought them to our house. Next day, those were the only people who gave their story out, because everybody was locked down in the hotel, so they couldn't get it. We saw that I did a lot of interviews on that time and so on, and then I was coming to Canada for receiving the John Humphrey Award instead of going to Bonn, because Do you remember that, by the way? John Humphrey was the person who was the major author of the Declaration of Human Rights at the UN, and he's Canadian. And Sima was receiving the award in his name in the middle of all of this kerfuffle. So go on. Yes. So they were organizing, the Bonn conference was going on in order to discuss the roadmap for Afghanistan. And then there were a list of us, some of us, to go to Bonn. And my name was there. And I said, no, I'm not going there. I'm going to Canada. And it was interesting because a journalist from Norway asked me that, why you're not going? And I said, I don't believe that they will come to a final decision soon. So that was, I came to Canada and then nobody actually contacted me if I want to be in the cabinet. I was in Vancouver. We were flying to Toronto that early morning when I received a call from my son. And he said, Mom, you become Minister of Women's Affairs. And you're also one of the vice president of Karzai. And I heard Karzai's name, and I have not seen him. But I saw his father on different conferences and discussion. So I said, my God, who say this? He said, CNN and BBC. So I put on the television, and I see that I was there. And so I took a hot shower to be awake. It was early morning. And then Canadian lovely friend Isabel was with me. So when I met her in the reception, I said, Isabel, this has happened. She said, what? I said, I become minister. Nobody's asked me, or nobody discussed and consulted me. Anyway, we took the flight to Edmonton. When the plane landed in Edmonton, they announced that Sima Samar should come ahead and show herself to the hostess. Okay, I walked, and then it was the Canadian...
The RCMP?
Yes, Canadian protocol officers waiting. So they took my backpack, and they had a special car and everything. They took us to a hotel. I was busy the whole day with the different meeting. Late night when I came to the hotel, and there was 2 bodyguards sitting.
RCMP.
Outside of the door, and I said, what's happened? Well, we are here. We are just here to protect you, but we don't bother you. You please go ahead. I couldn't sleep that night because it was really nightmare. What's happened to, and why my life has changed this way. Anyway, but then as we came to Ottawa, I was received very well by your Prime Minister and your cabinet, your parliament. That was interesting.
I remember I spoke to Sima on the phone at that time when she was between Vancouver and Edmonton, and the announcement had been made, but she hadn't really absorbed it. And when she saw the 2 arts, she left her room in the morning and went off to do her 75 interviews, because when you win the John Humphrey Award, you have to speak to every single person in Canada. And she came back, and these 2 RCMP officers were on either side of her door. And because of her struggle, the way she'd been fighting for women and girls in Afghanistan, she immediately thought the police were there and something was wrong. And she said, did I say something? And they said, you can say whatever you like. Well, so, but then you didn't go to that conference in
Germany.
But something happened that you've talked to me about, and it's certainly described well in the book, and I think it affects the whole situation today. What was left out in the agreement? Was it the Bonn Agreement, or was it the first meeting?
It was the Bonn Agreement, actually. Mm-hmm. I think because we were lobbying for women participation before they started the whole discussion. So I flew from Quetta to Islamabad to talk with the UN Secretary General representative for Afghanistan, who was Spanish man, Francis Vandrell. And I told him that women should be part of the decision making. Women should be part of the process in Afghanistan. And I said, I'm not fighting for myself, not Sima Samar. any woman. So it was only one woman, another Sima. She died, unfortunately, but she was a member of the delegation from the King side, from the Zahir Shah side in the Bonn Agreement. But yeah, I mean, what was missing in the Bonn Agreement, and now as well, was the justice issue, and not really put accountability in justice to the war crimes and crimes against humanity which happened in Afghanistan by all sides. It was by the government, of course, by the pro-Russian, and by the Mujahideen as well. Unfortunately, they didn't put that part. And that is, I believe, is one of the reasons that we don't reach to a sustainable peace and democracy in Afghanistan.
Tell me more about that. When you don't make people accountable for their crimes, you feel that it ultimately affects the result and you can't reach. Why is that?
Well, I think that when you do not touch accountability, particularly for the international crimes and war crimes and crimes against humanity, then you actually promote impunity. When there's impunity, then of course nobody respects the rule of law. Nobody respects the human rights, because and it's also promote the revenge by the victims also, because victims need and want justice. Justice is not for only putting people behind the bar or execute them. Justice is more than that. And particularly, I think it's really important to acknowledge the suffering of the victims. And nobody does that. I mean, at the end, they just put the same people who were part of the problem actually in Afghanistan in position of power. So how the people did not support the whole process. And it fueled the culture of impunity, and it fueled the corruption as well. Because if you get away with the crimes that you commit, then it's easy to get money, to misuse the public resources.
I remember at the time you speaking out about that, and you trying to call people to account. But there was a pretty big backlash to you, wasn't there?
Yes, I think it's still the same, same case. Because I was, as I said, what we did in the commission actually, we went to the people, we had a national consultation on war crimes and crimes against humanity, that what the people think. It's not only Sima Samar's wish, although I'm part of those victims, but it was very clear. It was very clear that the people did not want revenge, but they wanted justice. So in my view, and also on the view of the public in Afghanistan and the normal people who suffered during this different regime and war in the country, they want justice. They want acknowledgement of their suffering. They want to be healed, not really bleed forever. So what is happening in Afghanistan, the bleeding continues, the wound is not healing.
You know, I should fill you in on a story that happened at that time. Sima's moving across it gently, but her life was in great danger, and the UN came to her and said, you are in danger of being killed. We have to move you out of here. And we spoke at the time, and we spoke about maybe she would be safe in Canada. And I'm only a journalist. I have no power, right? But I called begging to get an answer from the then Foreign Minister, Bill Graham. Remember Bill Graham? And I told him basically what Sima just told you. And he didn't even pause. He said, we will issue her a visa before supper time tonight, and I will have a letter online by morning inviting her to come to Canada to help us better understand how we can help the new Afghanistan. In other words, he paved that way, and he paved it so quickly. As it turns out, Sima decided she would stay and fight her case because she was afraid if she ran away, well, left, it would be seen as running away. So she didn't come, but I thought it was an interesting side story for Canadians that Bill Graham just picked it up like that and wanted to bring her here.
Yep, I think I was very grateful for the support, but the United Nations and also President Karzai, both of them wanted me to become ambassador. I remember when President Karzai asked me to choose which country you want to go. And I said, no, I'm not working under the foreign minister that we had. And he said, no, you don't have to work with the foreign minister. And I said, how can I be ambassador and not obey the foreign minister that we had on that time? And he said, but I cannot protect you. And I said, if you think that I'm blocking the promotion of democracy in this country, I step aside. I don't have to work with the cabinet. I go back on my medical practice, which I like, but I don't go out. Then Ibrahimi, on that time, who was the special representative of United Nations, he came and said that, Sima, you save yourself for the future of this country. You choose the country. The Nordic countries are very good on women's rights. That is what you want. And I said, no, if I go out, nobody will be able to speak.
But you know, you did stay. And even though the 20 years, we've all been involved with watching Afghanistan with our own troops and our own humanitarians there, you accomplished a lot. Tell me about those. What was happening from your side?
Yes, then I moved to the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission. I think I'm proud to say that I was introducing the word human rights to my people, to different parts of the country. Although I had a lot of, as one of the Afghan journalists asked me, that you have very powerful enemies. And I said, I don't think I'm their enemy. Their own action is their enemy, so I'm not afraid from them. I don't have troops, I don't have militias, but I'm telling the truth, so I will not live. And I think we did a lot on human rights. From the Constitution, from criminalizing the domestic violence in Afghanistan for first time. That was private matters, nobody was talking about when people were, they were beating their wives all the time and discriminating against them. And also, a lot of other legislation that we were able to change in Afghanistan. The attitude of the people, we were teaching human rights to the police, to the army, to the National Security Directorate, and the people over there. And we were keeping them accountable if they were committing torture, for example. These are something that was exceptionally in good path than our neighboring countries. The Human Rights Commission in Afghanistan really achieved a lot on those fronts. And still, although they abolished the Ministry of Women's Affairs quickly and the Human Rights Commission, but people talks about human rights. And that is I feel that I'm part of that process.
So much so. In fact, during that 20-year period, you've heard people say, oh, it was a failure. Well, life expectancy in Afghanistan went from 47 years to 63 years in that 20-year period. It's not a failure, it's a miracle. And nation building began. So much was happening. There's journalists here, including Lisa LaFlamme. We've all covered Afghanistan for all these years, and we saw it happening. So what went wrong?
Well, I think I keep saying that the failure in Afghanistan was collective failure. It's the failure of people, of the government, of course, the leadership, and the international community and UN. Because we look at everything very superficially. First of all, quickly they announced Afghanistan as a success story, and they went to Iraq, and all the attention went to Iraq rather than really building a democratic Afghanistan. I remember when I was discussing this with Condoleezza Rice, which is in the book actually, I was begging her not to go to Iraq. Because going to Iraq, first of all, the attention withdrew from Afghanistan to Iraq. Secondly, you actually give possibility to young Muslim men to join the radical groups. And we see it now. Who was the ISIS? Who was all these Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, and everything came up after Afghanistan. But they did not listen to us. And then nobody had a strategy, a proper long-term strategy for Afghanistan. It was day-to-day or reactionary action rather than a long-term strategy to promote democracy and human rights in the country. But if you ignore human rights, you don't achieve peace. And a good example is Afghanistan, unfortunately, to learn lessons. The corruption was increased, and the blame game, they were blaming Afghan government, and Afghan government was blaming the international community. I think both were responsible on these, because keep saying, yes, Afghans were corrupt, but the Afghans, Canadian or Afghan American who came to Afghanistan, or Afghan from the European countries who came to Afghanistan and brought the money back to these countries, none of them were kept accountable. So it's easy to say Afghans are corrupt, yes. But how many people are kept accountable in these countries? They also committed some crimes over there. We have not seen much of accountability.
But
So
you've talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
You were pointing it out. Who did you say it to, and what did they say back to you?
To everyone, almost, everywhere, and in the media, and Afghan media, and also in the international media. They don't listen. Actually, they were thinking, like when I was saying that build Afghanistan as a good example of nation building and democratic society, then the other people will trust your intervention. And yes, it's done. Or now they are blaming that Afghans are never been governed. And this is part of their culture. And which worries me a lot is the current normalization of Taliban. And they keep saying that Taliban are the reality of Afghanistan. Yes, they are the reality of Afghanistan. But if you look at the scenes of those first day when the Taliban came to Kabul, when the people were running at the airport, that shows the people's support to the Taliban, or not support to the Taliban. Right. And the current situation, I mean, even now in front of every department of passport, men, women, and children are lining up in order to get passport. Even on the embassies in Iran or in Pakistan for passport, it shows that how much people are happy with the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. Yes, it's part of the society might support, but it's not a large part of the society.
So what needs to happen now?
One, I think Afghanistan still have to be in the agenda of the international community, including Canadian government. because you spend money in Afghanistan and you spend blood in Afghanistan and life in Afghanistan. Because the problem in Afghanistan will not stay in our boundary wall. It will reach, and it's shown. I mean, 9/11 is an example. Some of the other terrorist acts is example. Although most of them are not Afghans. They are non-Afghans, but they are trained in Afghanistan. Secondly, ignoring Afghanistan problem is not going to help any other conflict, either Ukraine or Gaza and Israel. Thirdly, we have to put the people in the center. I mean, the intervention of the other countries in Afghanistan, we still suffer from the power game in Afghanistan. You can see that the resolution from the Security Council is not passed because we have the regional power, the people who has the right to veto, not a strong resolution coming out of the Security Council. So I think that is important, that quality education and putting people in the center and victim in the center of everything in human rights.
My last question to you,
yes.
before we go to question period. When are you going to be back in Afghanistan?
I don't know, but I wish and I dream to go back.
Of course you do. Thank you, Sima.